All right, so I was teaching a Year 7 class the other day, and when you've been doing other things like Year 11 and 12 stuff, sometimes you forget the importance of some of these foundational ideas. So it's kind of what I wanted to talk about today. And basically it was just rounding decimals. So decimals obviously after the decimal point, not just whole numbers, because obviously that's probably a skill that comes before this. But I thought it was interesting, and then I was having some discussions with some other teachers about the best way to do this. So yeah, here's my attempt and what's sort of come to mind. So big picture stuff, why do we need to round decimals? Well, we obviously can't always keep the full decimal value for some of these decimals. We need a way to cut our decimals off cleanly, but still conserve the size of the number. So that's what this is all about. So some examples you might think about are prices. So if you go to the shops and you buy something and say it costs $3.91, well, the Australian currency system doesn't have 1 cent coins, at least not anymore. I'm not sure if we ever did. But we need to be able to round that effectively. So that's one example of when this might be necessary. Swimming and sprinting times are generally rounded to the nearest hundredth of a second, and things like tape measures round to the nearest tenth of a centimeter, for example. So we can see the importance of this in our everyday life, and that's what we're going to talk about. We're going to be, hopefully by the end of this, able to round decimals effectively even. We're going to do a bit of a tricky example as well. And just like when we're rounding whole numbers, rather than having hundreds and tens and thousands and ones and that sort of thing to the left of the decimal, now we're talking about tenths, hundredths, thousands, tens of thousands, and we're going to have a little bit of a picture as well to hopefully visualize the size of these things. So as we just said, every digit has a place value. Everyone's favorite number is pi, so that's what we've got here written in sort of place value form. So we've got 3.1415. Clearly we've got our tenths, hundredths, thousandths, and tens of thousandths columns going on there. And the decimal point is, between the ones and the tenths. So together we get our favorite number pi. And, I really want to drive home this idea of how big these numbers are. So let's pretend we've got our block of chocolate or our unit square here, and we've broken it up into hundredths. So we've got 10 rows and 10 columns. And so if we were to think about the size of 1/10, well, that's 1/10, I feel like there's no other way to really describe it, of one whole. So that's what we have in blue there. So that's 1/10. And then if we go to the next decimal along, which was 4 hundredths, well, we know the whole thing's broken up into hundredths, so we shade in 4 of those in yellow. That gives us 4 hundredths. I encourage you to pause and think, how are we going to represent 1/1000th on here? And hopefully you realize that if we were to take one of these 100th squares and then break that up into tenths, that one little sliver of 1/100th, sorry, I should say 1/10th of 1/100th is 1/1000th. So that would be that tiny little bit in red there would be 1/1000th if that whole square is one whole. Okay, and then so that was the decimal we had, or at least that was the decimals after the 3, right? It went 0.1 plus 0.04 plus 0.001 gave us that 0.141, or when we put the 3 in the ones column, we get 3.141. So hopefully you can start to get a sense that, as we move down these place values, things are getting 1/10 of the size. And that obviously works to the left and to the right of the decimal point. As we move to the right, it's 1/10 smaller. Okay, and so step 1, in terms of actually the method we're going to use to actually round decimals. So you're going to choose your rounding place, very first step. So where are you rounding to? Either the question will tell you or you have to make a decision, but decide which decimal place you're rounding to. Are we going to the hundredths? Are we going to the tenths? Are we going to the tens of thousands? Whatever it is. And then find what's called the critical digit, or what we're calling the critical digit. Look at the digit immediately to the right of your rounding place. It decides how you're going to round. That is the key thing. It's the critical thing. And then this is the key thing. So this is another key thing, I should say. Apply the rule. So step 3, if the critical digit is a 0, 1, 2, 3, or 4, you round down. So the digit to the left, the one that you're rounding to, stays the same. If it's a 5, 6, 7, 8, or 9, you round up. And the digit increases, the digit you're rounding to increases by 1. And then you drop everything after. It's not like rounding with whole numbers. we're just going to simply drop everything to the right of the position to which we're rounding. Okay, so let's have a look at an example because it might be a little bit tricky at the moment. So round 5.362 to the nearest hundredth. So we're going to the second column, the hundredths column. So that's our rounding place that we've put in blue there. And then the critical digit is going to be the one to the right of it. Now, if we go back to the previous slide, we saw that if it's a 0, 1, 2, 3, or 4, we round down. So that means that 2 basically becomes a 0. And we can say that this is just going to be 5.362 is approximately, that's what those wavy equal signs mean, 5.36. Notice that we just cut it off. We cut it off because we're rounding to the hundredth column. We just leave it there. We leave the 6 there and the 2 just disappears, but really it's become a 0. Okay? So that's the basic idea. Let's look at a bit of a trickier example when we might have to do a bit of a carry. So here's our number, 2.87999, and we want to round it to the nearest thousandths. So our first step, remember, is decide where we're rounding to. So we're rounding to the thousandths column, so we're going to put a square around that. And then the critical digit is the 9, so we look to the right of it. All right, we know using step 3 that that critical digit tells it it's a 9, so it rounds up, so that's going to become a 0. And then what we're actually going to have to do is we're going to have to carry it across 2. So the critical digit is 9, so we round up, checking that 1 is all you ever, checking that critical digit is all you ever need to do. But the rounding place digit, so the rounding place digit is also a 9, so that's also going to go to a 0. And so we need to carry it across again to the hundredths column. So it's going to become 2.880. Okay, so take a moment to digest that. Because the critical digit was a 9, we're going to round up. So that means the one to the left of it, the place we're rounding to, also goes up, but that's already a 9. And then so we have to go one more across. So we have to go across to the hundredths column, and that becomes an 8. And notice here that we've had to leave the 0 there because we are rounding to the thousandths place. So in our final answer, we have to have 3 decimal places. And I think that can be a little bit tricky for some people to, when you first encounter this, can be a bit tricky. So keep that in mind. All right, so there we go. Summarize. Let's have a look at all this. Rounding to any decimal. So choose your rounding place, find the critical digit, which is always immediately to its right. If it's a 0 to a 4, you round down. If it's a 5 to a 9, you round up. Purely convention that it's a 5. If it's a 5, we round up. Obviously, that's halfway in the middle. And drop every digit that comes after it. Our tricky example had us taking 2.87999, rounding to the nearest thousandths. Because the critical digit was a 9, that rounded up, which means we then had to carry it because the position we were rounding to is also a 9. We couldn't just put that up one. We had to bring it across to the next column. So we ended up getting 2.880. So that one digit decided everything, and a carry, you can think about it as the carry rippled across to the left. So big picture, if you too long didn't read, no matter how many digits follow, only the very next digit decides how you round. Okay, last thing I'll just say is, 2.87999, just ask yourself, is that really close to 2.880? And I think you would agree. Having 999 there, we're getting really close to being able to add one to the hundredths column there. So hopefully that made a bit of sense. If it did, give us a thumbs up. Good luck with all your studies, and I will talk to you soon.